It was a Thursday in late October, the air outside sharp with the promise of winter, the kind of day that made Sarah's bones ache from long hours on her feet. Emily's chatter about a cartoon puppy she'd watched that morning was a faint hum in Sarah's ears as she navigated the bread aisle, her eyes scanning for the cheapest loaf. "Mummy, want cookies!" Emily declared, her voice insistent, her chubby finger pointing at a tower of chocolate chip packages, their bright colours screaming temptation. Sarah's chest tightened, her mental tally of the grocery budget already stretched to breaking. "Not today, sweetie," she murmured, her voice soft but strained, her fingers brushing the plastic wrap of a day-old loaf marked down to $1. She turned to double-check the price, her back to the cart for a fleeting second, her thoughts on the electric bill due tomorrow. A second was all it took. When Sarah turned back, the cart was still. Emily was gone. The pink jacket with the bunny patch, the one Sarah had sewn on herself, pricking her thumb with every clumsy stitch, draped limply over the cart's edge, as if Emily had simply dissolved into the air. The store's noise collapsed into a muffled roar, like Sarah was underwater. Her heart slammed against her ribs, a wild cage thing. "Emily!" she called, her voice slicing through the chatter around her, sharp enough to turn heads. She scanned the aisle, her eyes darting to every shadow, every gap between shelves, expecting to see those curls, that flash of pink. Nothing. Her breath hitched, and she shoved the cart forward, her steps jerky, her voice rising. "Emily!" The name cracked, raw and desperate, echoing off the high ceiling. The man by the frozen foods was gone, his absence a void that swallowed the air. Sarah's world unraveled into chaos. She abandoned the cart, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum as she ran down aisles, shouting Emily's name. Shoppers parted like a reluctant sea, their faces a blur of concern, curiosity, and irritation. A young clerk, his acne-scarred face, barely older than a high schooler's, approached, his name tag reading Tyler. "Ma'am, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Sarah's words tumbled out, jagged and breathless. "My daughter! She's gone! Someone took her!" Tyler's eyes widened, and he fumbled for his walkie-talkie, his fingers clumsy as he called for the manager. Sarah's hands shook as she described Emily, 3 years old, brown curls, green eyes like her father's, wearing a pink jacket with a bunny patch. The manager, a stout woman with a severe bun, arrived and locked the store down, her voice barking orders over the intercom, but it was too late. The security cameras caught only fragments. A grainy glimpse of a man in a dark coat, his face obscured, slipping through a side exit with a small, wriggling bundle in his arms. The police descended, their radios crackling, their questions relentless. Sarah sat in the manager's cramped office, clutching Emily's jacket, its faint strawberry scent clinging to the fabric. She answered every question, her voice hollow, her mind replaying that moment by the bread aisle, the second she'd turned away. The lead detective, a man named Carver with tired eyes and a nicotine stain on his fingers, promised they'd find her. Sarah believed him at first, clinging to his words like a lifeline. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. She plastered missing posters across Willow Creek, Emily's smiling face, taken at the park the day before she vanished, staring back from every lamppost, every diner window. The media swarmed, their cameras flashing, their questions probing, wounds that never healed. "How do you feel, Ms. Mitchell?" they asked, as if she could distill her agony into sound bites. The frenzy faded, the leads evaporated, and Sarah was left with nothing but guilt, a gnawing certainty that she'd failed her daughter, and an emptiness that consumed her like fire. Sarah had been 22 when Emily was born, a naive girl, who'd fallen for a charming drifter named Paul, whose green eyes and easy smile had promised a future he'd never intended to deliver. He was gone before Emily's first birthday, leaving Sarah with a newborn and a heart full of cracks. She'd built a life for them, meager but fierce, working doubles at the diner, singing lullabies to Emily in their tiny apartment, dreaming of a day when they'd have more than just each other. Emily was her anchor, her joy, her reason to keep. going. Losing her was like losing the sun. 18 years later, Sarah was 40, her face etched with lines that told a story of grief and survival. Her blonde hair, once vibrant, was streaked with grey, pulled back in a haphazard ponytail. She still lived above the diner, in an apartment that smelled of coffee grounds and old wood. Emily's room remained a frozen relic, stuffed animals. On the shelves, a tiny bed with a faded quilt, drawings of rainbows and stick-figure families pinned to a corkboard. Sarah dusted it weekly, her fingers lingering on each toy, each crayon mark, as if touch could keep Emily close. The door stayed, closed but never locked, a silent prayer that somehow, against all odds, her daughter might walk through it. Willow Creek had moved on, its residents offering pitying glances or awkward silences when Sarah passed. She carried Emily's absence like a stone in her chest, heavy and unyielding. Her life a cycle of work, sleep, and the endless ache of what-ifs. It was a rainy evening in June 2025, the diner's neon sign buzzing and flickering in the downpour when the bell above the door chimed. Sarah was wiping down the counter, her hands moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 shifts, her eyes dull with exhaustion. The diner was nearly empty, just a trucker named Hank sipping coffee in the corner, his newspaper rustling softly. Sarah glanced up, and her breath caught. A young woman stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered to her face, her eyes, green, like Paul's, like Emily's, holding a storm of their own. She was tall, with sharp cheekbones and a wary posture, like a deer poised to bolt. Something about her, a flicker of familiarity, tugged at Sarah's heart, but she couldn't place it. The girl hesitated, then stepped inside, her worn boots leaving wet prints on the checkered floor. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but threaded with fatigue. The girl didn't answer immediately. She clutched a battered backpack, her fingers white-knuckled around the strap. Her gaze locked on Sarah's, searching, almost pleading. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" the girl asked, her voice low, rough, like she hadn't spoken in hours. Sarah's hand froze on the counter, the rag still in her grip. "Yeah," she said, her brow furrowing. "Who's asking?" The girl took a step closer, her breath uneven, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. "My name's Lily," she said, her voice trembling now. I think I'm your daughter." The rag slipped from Sarah's hand, hitting the floor with a faint slap. The diner spun, its walls closing in, the hum of the refrigerator deafening in her ears. She stared at Lily, her mind a whirlwind. Those eyes, that tilt of her head, the faint dimple in her cheek. Could it be? No, it couldn't. Emily was gone. The police had said so. The private investigator she'd bankrupted herself hiring had said so. His final report a cold, clinical, dead end. Yet here was this girl, standing in her diner, claiming a past Sarah had buried under 18 years of pain. Emily? Sarah's voice broke, barely a whisper, her legs threatening to give way. She stepped around the counter, her movements unsteady, her heart a drumbeat in her chest. Lily flinched at the name, her expression a mask of uncertainty, fear, and something deeper. Hope, maybe, or desperation. "I don't know," Lily said, her voice cracking. "I don't remember much, but I have this." She reached into her backpack, her hands shaking, and pulled out a small, tattered object, a pink jacket with a bunny patch, its colours faded but unmistakable. Sarah's knees buckled, and she caught herself on the edge of a booth, her breath a ragged gasp. "Where did you get that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes locked on the jacket, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and terror. She'd sewn that patch herself, sitting up late after a shift, her fingers clumsy with exhaustion, cursing under her breath when the needle drew blood. It was Emily's, as real as the memory of her laughter. Lily's hands trembled as she held it out, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I've had it as long as I can remember," she said. I found a letter, too. It said my real name might be Emily Mitchell, that you're my mother. Sarah's mind reeled, a storm of questions crashing against her skull. A letter? Who wrote it? Where had this girl been? She wanted to reach out, to touch Lily's face, to trace the lines of her features and see if they matched the child she'd lost. But fear held her back. Fear of hope, fear of another heartbreak, fear that this was some cruel mirage. Where have you been? She asked, her voice raw, each word a blade. All these years, where were you? Lily's gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders hunching as if bracing for a blow. I don't know everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was raised by a man who said he was my father. He wasn't kind. I ran away when I was 16. I've been trying to piece it together ever since. Sarah's heart pounded, her hands clenching into fists, her nails biting into her palms. A man. The man in the dark coat, the shadow who'd stolen her world. Who was he? She demanded, her voice sharp, trembling with a fury she'd buried for years. What did he do to you? Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she shook, her head, her jaw tight. I can't. Not yet, she said, her voice breaking. I had to find you. I had to know if it's true. Sarah took a shaky step forward, her instincts screaming to pull this girl into her arms, to claim her as Emily, to erase the years of pain with a single embrace. But doubt gnawed at her, a cold, insidious voice whispering of scams and liars, of stories she'd seen on late-night news about con artists preying on grieving families. 18 years was a long time. People changed. Memories lied. But that jacket was real, a tangible piece of a past she'd never let go. Come. With me, Sarah said, her voice steadier now, though her heart raced. She led Lily to the back of the diner, to the tiny office where she kept her schedules and bills, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and ink. She opened a drawer, her hands trembling, and pulled out a photo, a Polaroid of 3-year-old Emily, smiling in that same pink jacket, her curls wild in the sunlight of a park. She held it out to Lily, watching her face, searching for a reaction, for truth. Lily's breath caught, a soft, pained sound. She took the photo, her fingers trembling, her eyes locked on the image. That's me, she whispered, her voice breaking. I remember that day, the park, the swings, the yellow slide. Sarah's heart stopped, her breath frozen in her chest. The park, Emily's favourite place where they'd spent that last morning before the supermarket, Emily laughing as Sarah pushed her on the swings, the yellow slide her obsession. No one could know that, not unless… Tell me more, Sarah said, her voice urgent, her hands gripping the edge of the desk to keep from shaking. What else do you remember? Lily's eyes flickered with something. Fear, pain, a shadow of something deeper. Bits and pieces, she said, her voice distant, like she was reaching into a fog. The slide was hot, burned my legs. A man called my name and I ran to him. Then it's blank. Nothing clear until I was older, maybe 7 or 8. He, the man who raised me, he said my mother didn't want me, that she left me behind. Sarah's blood roared in her ears, her vision narrowing to a pinprick. That's a lie, she snapped, her voice shaking with a rage that felt like it could burn the world down. I never stopped looking for you, never. I spent every dime I had, followed every lead. Even when they led nowhere, I lost everything but hope, and even that was barely enough. Lily's eyes softened, a flicker of something like belief, but she didn't speak. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to anchor herself, her hands unclenching slowly. What's in the letter? She asked, her voice quieter now, though no less urgent. Lily hesitated, then reached into her backpack again, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper, its edges yellowed and frayed. This is it, she said, handing it to Sarah, her fingers brushing Sarah's for a moment, a fleeting connection that sent a jolt through her. Sarah unfolded it with trembling hands, the paper crackling in the silence. The ink was smudged, the handwriting hurried, almost frantic. Her name is Emily Mitchell. Her mother is Sarah Mitchell, 1427 Pine Street, Willow Creek. If you find this, get her home. No signature, no date, just those words, stark and commanding, a message from a ghost. Where did you find this? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible, her eyes tracing the words as if they could reveal their author. In his things, Lily said, her voice tight. After I ran away. He kept it hidden in a locked box, with the jacket and some other stuff. Photos, papers. I don't know why he kept it. He never said anything about you, except that you didn't want me. Sarah's mind raced, a kaleidoscope of questions and half-formed theories. Who was this man? Why take Emily? Why keep a letter that could lead back to Sarah, like a secret he couldn't destroy? She looked at Lily, searching her face for answers, for proof. The girl's eyes held a haunted look, one Sarah knew too well from her own mirror. The look of someone who'd survived too much, who carried scars no one could see. Come home with me, Sarah said suddenly, the words bursting out before she could stop them, driven by a need she couldn't name. I need to know. I need to be sure. Lily's shoulders tensed, her eyes flickering with doubt. I don't want to hurt you, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. If I'm not her, I don't want to make it worse. Sarah's throat tightened, tears burning her eyes. You won't, she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it, the fear of another loss a shadow at her back. Please, just come with me. Lily nodded, a small, hesitant movement, and they left the diner together, the rain hammering down like a judgment. Sarah's apartment was a short walk, but every step felt like a journey across a chasm, the weight of 18 years pressing down. She didn't know what waited at the end, truth, lies, or something in between. But for the first time in years, hope flickered, fragile as a candle flame in a storm. The walk was silent, the rain soaking through Sarah's thin jacket, her sneakers squelching on the pavement. Lily kept pace, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her head bowed against the wind. Sarah stole glances at her, searching for Emily in the curve of her jaw, the way she moved. The girl's face was guarded, her eyes distant, but there was something, a spark, a shadow, that felt like home. At the apartment, Sarah fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking as she unlocked the door. The space was small, cluttered with thrift store furniture, the air heavy with the scent of old books and diner grease. Photos lined the walls. Emily at her first birthday, covered in cake. Emily in a Halloween costume, a tiny witch with a crooked hat. Emily and Sarah at the park, their smiles bright against a sky that seemed bluer then. Sarah gestured to the couch, its faded cushions sagging in the middle, and Lily sat, still clutching her backpack like a shield. Sarah didn't sit. She paced, her hands twisting together, her mind a storm of questions she didn't know how to ask. Tell me about him, she said finally, her voice sharper than she intended. The man who raised you. What was his name? Lily's jaw tightened, her eyes flicking to the floor. He called himself John, she said, her voice low, measured. I don't know if that was his real name. He was careful. We moved a lot. Small towns, always rentals, never more than a year in one place. He worked odd jobs, construction mostly, always paid in cash. He didn't talk about his past, didn't have friends. It was just us. Sarah's stomach churned, a sick, twisting feeling. What was he like? She asked, her voice trembling, dreading the answer, but needing it. Lily's eyes darkened, a shadow passing over her face. He was strict, she said, her words careful, like she was navigating a minefield. Controlling. He didn't let me go to school, said it wasn't safe, that people would ask too many questions. I was homeschooled, but it was just whatever books he found. old textbooks, library discards. He'd get angry if I asked about my mother, about you. Said you didn't want me, that you left me behind because I was a burden. Sarah's fists clenched, her nails biting into her palms, the pain grounding her against the rage that threatened to consume her. He lied, she said, her voice shaking, each word a vow. I looked for you every day. I hired investigators, followed every tip, even when they led to nothing. I sold my car, my jewelry, everything I had. I never stopped. Lily's eyes met hers, a flicker of something. Belief, maybe, or longing. But she didn't speak. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, her hands unclenching slowly. Did he hurt you? The question hung heavy, a weight Sarah wasn't sure she could bear. Lily's gaze dropped, her fingers tightening on the backpack strap. Not like you're thinking, she said, her voice barely audible. He didn't hit me. Not often, but he made me feel small. Like I was nothing. He'd lock me in my room if I disobeyed, sometimes for days. He'd say it was for my own good, that the world was dangerous, that I needed him to survive. Sarah's heart cracked, a fresh wound layered over old scars. She wanted to cross the room, to hold this girl who might be her daughter, to erase the pain in her eyes. But she held back, fear and doubt still clawing at her. The possibility that this wasn't Emily, a knife at her throat. What made you run away? She asked, her voice softer now, though no less urgent. Lily looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the frayed edge of her backpack. I found the letter when I was 15, she said, her voice distant, like she was reliving it. It was in that locked box, with the jacket and some photos, not of me, but of places, houses, people I didn't know. I started asking questions, pushing him. He got erratic, paranoid, started checking the windows at night, locking me in my room even when I hadn't done anything. I knew I had to get out. One night, he passed out drunk, and I took the letter, the jacket, and whatever cash I could find, maybe $50. I've been on my own since. Sarah's chest ached, her breath shallow. Where did you go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Everywhere, Lily said, her voice hollow. Bus stations, shelters, motels when I could afford them. I worked under the table, waitressing, cleaning houses, whatever I could find. I kept the letter hidden, read it every night, like it was a map to something real. It took me 2 years to track you down. I found an old article about Emily's disappearance, saw your name, your address. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. Sarah's eyes burned, tears spilling over, hot against her cheeks. If you're Emily, she said, her voice breaking, I've never wanted anything more. Lily's lips trembled, her eyes glistening, but she didn't cry. I want to believe I'm her, she said, her voice raw. But I don't know. For sure. My memories are broken. I remember the park, the slide, but it's like looking through a shattered window. Everything else is his voice, his rules, his world. Sarah nodded, her throat tight, her mind racing. She needed proof. A DNA test, records, something to silence the doubts. But more than that, she needed to understand why. Why had this man taken her daughter? What had he wanted? And why keep that letter, a secret that could unravel everything? I have her room, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes flicking to the hallway. It's exactly how it was. I couldn't change it. Lily's eyes widened, a spark of something, curiosity, fear, hope, flashing within them. She stood, her movements slow, almost reluctant, her backpack still clutched tight. Sarah led her to the door at the end of the hall, her heart pounding, her hand trembling as she turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a time capsule of a 3-year-old's life. A tiny bed with a faded quilt, its pattern of stars and moons, barely visible, a shelf of stuffed animals, their fur matted from years of dust, drawings pinned to a corkboard, their colours dulled but vibrant in memory. Rainbows, flowers, a stick-figure family labelled Mommy and Me. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and longing, a shrine to a child who'd never come home. Lily stepped inside, her breath catching, a soft, pained sound. She touched the quilt, her fingers lingering on the fabric, tracing the faint outline of a star. "This feels familiar," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Like a dream, I can't quite hold." Sarah's chest tightened, her breath shallow, her eyes burning with unshed tears. "Do you remember anything else?" she asked, her voice urgent, desperate for another piece of proof. Lily's eyes scanned the room, slow and deliberate, like she was afraid of what she might find. They landed on a small wooden rocking horse in the corner, its paint chipped, its mane a tangle of yarn. "That," she said, her voice trembling, her hand reaching out as if to touch it but stopping short. "I remember falling off it. I cried, and you kissed my knee, put a band-aid with little hearts on it." Sarah's breath stopped, her heart a frozen thing in her chest. She hadn't told anyone about that moment, a quiet afternoon when Emily had tumbled, her wails filling the apartment, until Sarah soothed her with a kiss and a band-aid from a box with heart patterns. It was too specific, too intimate to be a memory no one could fake. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, hot and unstoppable, and she didn't try to fight them. "Emily," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice a prayer, a plea. This time, she didn't hold back. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Lily's cheek, her skin cool and soft, a connection that felt like coming home. Lily froze, her eyes wide, then leaned into the touch, her own tears falling, silent and steady. "I'm scared," Lily admitted, her voice barely audible, her words a confession. "I want this to be real, but I'm scared it's not." Sarah pulled her into a hug, her arms tight around the girl who might be her daughter, her heart a wild, aching thing. "We'll find out," she promised, her voice fierce, a vow carved in stone. "We'll do a DNA test, whatever it takes, but right now, I need to hold you." They stood there, clinging to each other, the weight of 18 years pressing down but not breaking them. Sarah's mind swirled with questions about the man named John, the letter, the years stolen from them, the why of it all. But for now, she held on, letting hope and fear coexist in the fragile space between them. A mother and a girl who might be her daughter, bound by a past neither fully understood. The rain pounded against the window, a relentless drumbeat of uncertainty, its rhythm a mirror to Sarah's racing heart. She knew the truth was out there, buried in the shadows of a man named John, in the secrets of a letter that shouldn't exist. But for the first time in 18 years, she felt something other than despair. She felt alive, tethered to a hope that burned brighter than fear, a flame she'd guard with everything she had. The rain hammered the cabin's sagging roof, a relentless roar that seemed to echo the chaos in Sarah Mitchell's chest. The single bulb overhead flickered, casting jagged shadows across the mildewed walls, its light barely holding back the darkness that pressed in from the pine forest outside. Sarah stood rigid, her blood-slick fingers wrapped around a kitchen knife, its blade a faint glint in the dim glow. Her arm throbbed where a shallow cut oozed blood. Her side stung from a graze, and her thigh burned with every shift of her weight. But her eyes were fierce, locked on the back door where a soft, deliberate rattle had just ceased. Behind her, Lily, maybe Emily, maybe her daughter, crouched, her green eyes wide with terror, her breath shallow and ragged, her hands trembling as they clutched Sarah's arm. The pink jacket with the bunny patch, faded but unmistakable, lay crumpled on the sagging couch, a relic of a life stolen 18 years ago in a supermarket aisle. The letter, scrawled in hurried ink, her name is Emily Mitchell. Her mother is Sarah Mitchell, 1427 Pine Street, Willow Creek. If you find this, get her home. rested on the rickety table, its yellowed edges curling like a secret clawing to be free. The forest beyond the cabin was a black void, the thin walls a fragile barrier against the danger lurking in the dark. Sarah's heart pounded, a wild drumbeat that drowned out the rain's roar as a chilling hum drifted through the wall. An old folk song, faint but unmistakable, its melody a mockery of the terror gripping her. It was him, John, the man who'd haunted her nightmares since that Thursday in 2007, when Emily's giggles had turned to silence, when a moment's distraction by the bread aisle had cost Sarah everything. Lily's whisper, raw and trembling, confirmed it. It's him. He's here. Sarah tightened her grip on the knife, her knuckles white, her body a shield between Lily and the door. Stay behind me, she ordered, her voice low but fierce, a mother's instinct burning through, the fear that clawed at her. Lily obeyed, her hands clutching Sarah's arm tighter, her breath hot and uneven against Sarah's neck, her body trembling like a leaf in a storm. The hum stopped, replaced by a soft scrape, like a boot shifting on the cabin's back porch. Deliberate and predatory, Sarah's pulse roared in her ears, her mind racing through Lily's fragmented memories. John's crescent-shaped scar, his paranoia, his locked boxes filled with secrets, the photos of strangers she'd glimpsed as a child. Who was he? Why had he taken her daughter? And why, after all these years, was he here now, a ghost made flesh, hunting them in the dark? The front door creaked open, and Ray Carver stepped inside, rain dripping from his hooded coat, his face etched with grim determination. The retired detective's gun was drawn, its barrel gleaming faintly, his eyes scanning the room, landing on Sarah's bloodied arm, the knife in her hand, and Lily's pale, trembling form. He's close, Carver said, his voice low and urgent, cutting through the rain's roar. My contact just confirmed. John's been spotted in town asking about a girl matching her description. He nodded toward Lily, his expression a mix of guilt, resolve, and something unreadable. Fear, perhaps, or recognition that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Sarah's stomach twisted, her eyes flicking to the back door, where the scrape had come from. He's here, she said, her voice steady despite the terror coiling inside her. We heard him, humming. Carver's jaw tightened, his hand steadying on his gun, his flashlight cutting a sharp beam through the gloom, catching the glint of broken glass in the corner where a window had been boarded up. Lock the front door, he ordered, moving toward the back, his boots silent on the dusty floor, his movements those of a man who'd faced shadows before but never one this dark. Don't move until I say. Sarah bolted the front door, her hands shaking, the knife still clutched tight, her blood leaving faint smears on the lock, her arm a searing ache with every movement. She turned to Lily, her voice a fierce whisper, her eyes burning with protectiveness. If anything happens, you run, through the front, into the woods. Don't look back, promise me. Lily's eyes glistened, her voice breaking, her hands still gripping Sarah's arm, her nails digging into her skin. I'm not leaving you, she said, her words fierce despite the fear trembling through her. Her green eyes, Emily's eyes, Paul's eyes, blazing with a defiance that made Sarah's heart swell and break. If I'm Emily, I've already lost you once. I won't do it again. Sarah's throat tightened, tears burning her eyes, but she forced them back. Her love for this girl, her daughter, she knew it in her bones, a fire that burned through her fear. We're getting through this, she said, her voice a vow, a prayer, her hand brushing Lily's cheek, a fleeting touch that felt like home. Together. A sharp bang against the back door shattered the silence, the wood splintering slightly under the force, a violent promise of what waited outside. Sarah and Lily dropped to the floor, their bodies pressed against the cold, dusty boards, their breaths shallow, their hearts racing in unison. Carver cursed, his gun raised, his flashlight beam darting across the room, catching the faint shimmer of dust motes in the air. Get down, He barked, his voice taut, his body angled toward the door, his shoulders squared against the threat. The banging stopped, replaced by that chilling hum again, closer now, seeping through the cracks like poison, its melody twisting. Sarah's gut, a sickening reminder of the man who'd stolen her world. Her mind flashed to the supermarket, to the bread aisle where she'd turned away for a second, to the man in the dark coat who'd vanished with Emily, leaving only her. Pink jacket behind. Was this him? Come to finish what he'd started. She clutched the knife, her blood dripping onto the floor, her eyes locked on the door, every nerve screaming to protect the girl behind her, to rewrite the past she'd failed to change. Carver edged toward the back door, his movements slow, deliberate, his gun steady despite the tension radiating from him, his flashlight beam a lifeline in the dark. "John!" he called, his voice slicing through the rain's roar, sharp and commanding, a challenge thrown into the void. "I know you're out there. Step away, or I shoot." Silence, heavy and suffocating, answered. The rain's roar the only sound, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to mock their fear. Then a voice, low, smooth, almost amused, slithered from the darkness beyond the door, chilling Sarah to the bone. "You don't want to do that, Carver," it said, the words laced with a quiet menace, a predator toying with its prey. "You don't know what you're protecting." Sarah's blood ran cold, her grip on the knife tightening until her hand ached, her arm burning with every pulse. That voice. It was him, the shadow who'd haunted her for 18 years. The man who'd taken Emily and left Sarah with nothing but guilt, pain, and a void that had swallowed her life. Lily whimpered, her hands clutching Sarah's arm tighter, her body trembling violently, her breath a ragged gasp. "It's him," she whispered, her voice raw with terror, her eyes wide and glassy, a child's fear in a woman's face. "He found me." Sarah's rage surged, a fire that burned through her fear, her voice rising, fierce and unbroken, a mother's defiance that felt like it could shatter the walls. "You're not taking her," she shouted, the words echoing in the small cabin, a challenge thrown back at the darkness, her heart a wild thing in her chest. "You stole her once, not again." A soft laugh, chilling and deliberate, came from outside, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine, a sound that crawled under her skin and nested there. "You don't understand, Sarah," the voice said, her name a violation on his lips, a twisted intimacy that made her stomach churn, a mockery of the love she'd carried for Emily. "She was never yours to keep." The door exploded inward, wood splintering in a violent cascade, shards flying like shrapnel, and a tall, thin figure stepped into the flickering light. John. His dark hair was streaked with grey, his face lined but sharp, a crescent-shaped scar, gleaming on his left cheek like a brand, a mark that matched Lily's memory, a detail that made Sarah's heart stop. His eyes, cold, calculating, almost reptilian, locked on Lily, a twisted smile curling his lips, a predator's grin that made Sarah's blood freeze. In his hand, a knife glinted, its blade longer and crueler than Sarah's, its edge promising pain, its weight a silent threat. Carver fired, the shot deafening in the small space, the muzzle flash briefly illuminating John's face, his smile unchanged, his eyes gleaming with a fanatic's zeal. But John moved faster, ducking behind the doorframe with a grace that seemed inhuman, the bullet splintering wood where his head had been, the sound a sharp crack that echoed in Sarah's ears. "Stay back!" Carver shouted, his gun trained on the doorway, his flashlight beam dancing wildly, searching for the shadow that had vanished, his breath uneven, but his resolve unbroken. Sarah pulled Lily toward the front door, her heart pounding, her mind racing, her bloodied arms screaming with every movement, her side and thigh stinging with fresh wounds. "We have to go," she whispered, her hand fumbling with the bolt, her fingers slick with blood and rain, her vision blurring with pain and fear. But before she could unlock it, a window to their left shattered, glass spraying across the floor like jagged rain, a violent intrusion that tore a scream from Lily's throat, raw and piercing. Sarah spun, her knife raised, her body shielding. Lily's, her instincts a primal roar, her heart screaming one word: Emily. John was there, inside now, his knife gleaming in the dim light, his eyes fixed on Lily with a hunger that made Sarah's skin crawl, a possessive gaze that spoke of years of control, of a twisted bond she couldn't comprehend. Carver fired again, the shot grazing John's shoulder, blood blooming through his dark coat, a dark stain spreading, but he barely flinched, moving with a predator's grace, ducking behind the couch, his hum resuming, soft and mocking. "You can't run, Lily," he said, his voice calm, almost tender, but laced with a darkness that chilled Sarah to the bone, a promise of pain and possession that made her stomach churn. "You belong with me." Sarah's rage boiled over, her fear incinerated by a mother's fury, a fire that had smouldered for 18 years and now blazed unchecked. "She's my daughter!" she roared, lunging forward, her knife slashing toward him, a wild arc fueled by pain, loss, and a love that had never faded. John sidestepped, his own blade flashing, catching Sarah's arm in a shallow slice that burned like fire, a fresh wound layered over the old, blood dripping onto the floor. She gasped, her vision narrowing, but she didn't stop, her momentum carrying her forward, her body a shield between John and Lily, her heart a wild thing that refused to break. Carver tackled John from the side, the two men crashing to the floor, the gun skidding across the boards, out of reach, its metal glinting in the flickering light. Sarah staggered, her arm a searing ache, her side and thigh stinging, blood soaking her clothes, but she grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her toward the front door, her breath ragged, her vision blurring with pain and rage. "Run!" she shouted, fumbling with the bolt, her blood-slick fingers slipping, her heart screaming, her mind a storm of fear and determination. Lily hesitated, her eyes on Sarah, on the blood staining her sleeve, her face pale with fear and defiance, a strength in her that Sarah hadn't seen before, a spark of the child she'd lost. "I'm not leaving you!" she cried, her voice fierce, her hands grabbing Sarah's shoulders, steadying her, a bond forged in blood and terror that felt unbreakable. John threw Carver off, his knife slashing, catching Carver's shoulder in a deep cut that made the detective grunt, blood blooming through his coat, a dark stain spreading. Carver lunged again, tackling John against the wall, their bodies a tangle of violence, grunts and crashes filling the air, the sound of flesh and bone a sickening counterpoint to the rain's roar. "Go!" Carver shouted, his voice strained, his hands grappling for John's knife, blood slicking the floor, his eyes meeting Sarah's for a fleeting moment, a silent plea to save Lily. Sarah yanked the door open, the rain pouring in, cold and merciless, a curtain of water that blurred the world beyond. The forest, a dark, endless maze ahead. She pulled Lily outside, their feet slipping on the wet porch, mud sucking at their shoes, the air sharp with the scent of pine and fear. Behind them, the sounds of struggle, grunts, crashes, the sickening thud of flesh, followed. But Sarah didn't look back, her focus on Lily, on survival, on rewriting the past she'd failed to change. They ran, Lily's hand tight in hers, the rain blinding, the woods swallowing them whole, a labyrinth of shadows and danger. They stumbled through, the trees, branches clawing at their faces, tearing at their clothes, mud sucking at their shoes, the forest a maze with no end. Sarah's arm burned, blood soaking her sleeve, her side and thigh throbbing with every step, her breath heaving, her vision blurring with pain and exhaustion. Lily's grip was fierce, her own breath coming in gasps, her eyes darting behind them, searching for the shadow she'd fled for years, the man who'd caged her life, who'd stolen her name, her memories, her mother. The rain was a relentless assault, soaking them to the bone, its cold seeping into their skin. But they didn't stop, driven by a shared instinct to survive, to reclaim what had been stolen. A gunshot cracked through the rain, sharp and final, and Sarah froze, her heart stopping, her breath caught in her throat, her body trembling with dread. "Carver," she whispered, her eyes meeting Lily's, fear mirrored in their gazes, a shared terror that the detective was gone, that John had won, that the nightmare would never end. The silence that followed was worse than the shot, heavy with uncertainty, the forest holding its breath, the rain a soft roar that seemed to mock their fear. "We can't stop," Lily said, her voice trembling but resolute, pulling Sarah forward, her hands steady despite the terror in her eyes, a strength that made Sarah's heart swell, a glimpse of the daughter she'd lost and found. "He's coming." They ran deeper into the forest, the rain easing slightly, the trees thinning into a clearing where the moon broke through the clouds, casting a pale, ghostly light that turned the world silver and shadow. Sarah's legs burned, her arm a searing ache, her side and thigh throbbing, blood leaving a faint trail in the mud. But she stopped, her breath heaving, her eyes scanning the trees, searching for movement, for danger. Her knife still clutched tight, slick with blood and rain. "We need to hide," she said, her voice low, urgent, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her resolve unbroken. "Somewhere he can't find us." Lily nodded, her eyes wide, her face streaked with rain and tears, her breath uneven but determined, her hands shaking but steady. "There," she said, pointing to a cluster of boulders, their shapes looming like ancient sentinels in the dark, a natural fortress against the night, their moss-slick surfaces glistening in the moonlight. They scrambled behind them, crouching low, their bodies pressed against the cold, damp stone, their breaths shallow, the forest silent except for the drip of rain and the distant snap of twigs, each sound a potential threat. Sarah held Lily close, her good arm around her, the knife resting on her knee, her blood dripping onto the ground, mingling with the mud, her side a sharp ache with every breath. "If I'm Emily," Lily whispered, her voice breaking, her head resting against Sarah's shoulder, her body trembling with cold and fear. "I'm sorry I forgot you. I tried to remember, but he took it all. My name, my home, everything." Sarah's tears fell, hot against the cold rain, her heart breaking and mending in the same breath. A love so fierce it burned through her pain, her fear, her doubts. "You're here now," she said, her voice fierce, a vow carved in her soul, her hand brushing Lily's wet hair, a touch that felt like reclaiming a piece of her heart. "That's enough. You're enough." A shadow moved in the trees, tall and thin, the faint hum of that old song drifting through the air, chilling and deliberate, a sound that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She tensed, her body rigid, the knife raised, her eyes narrowing as she peered through the gap between the boulders, her heart pounding. John stepped into the clearing, his knife gleaming in the moonlight, his scar stark against his pale face, his eyes fixed on the boulders with a predator's certainty, as if he could smell their fear, as if he'd always known where they'd run. His coat was bloodied, his shoulder stained dark where Carver's bullet had grazed him, but he moved with a relentless grace, undeterred by the wound, his hum a soft, mocking lullaby. "You can't run forever, Lily," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle, but laced with a darkness that made Sarah's skin crawl, a promise of pain and possession that twisted her gut. "You're mine. You've always been mine." Sarah stood, her body trembling, her knife raised, blood dripping from her arm, her side and thigh a sharp ache with every breath, her eyes blazing with a fury that felt like it could burn the world. "She's my daughter," she said, her voice a roar, a mother's fury unleashed, echoing through the clearing like a challenge, a vow, a truth that had endured 18 years of pain. "You stole her, but you don't get to keep her. Not now, not ever." John's smile was cold, his eyes flicking to the knife, unafraid, almost amused, a predator toying with his prey. "You don't know the whole story, Sarah," he said, stepping closer, his boots sinking into the mud, his knife twirling in his hand with casual menace, the moonlight glinting off its edge. Emily wasn't just yours. She was special. Chosen. Sarah's heart stuttered, confusion mixing with her rage, her mind grappling with his words, a puzzle she couldn't solve in the heat of fear. Chosen for what? She demanded, her voice shaking, her eyes never leaving his, searching for truth in the darkness of his gaze, her knife steady despite the pain coursing through her. John's smile widened, a predator's grin, his eyes gleaming with a fanatic's zeal, a chilling contrast to the knife in his hand. For something bigger than you, he said, his voice low, almost reverent, a secret spilling out like venom. A purpose you couldn't comprehend. Her blood, her name, her place in the order. I protected her, kept her safe, shaped her for what's coming. But she betrayed me, ran away, and now I have to end this. Lily's voice cut through, sharp and fierce, her body rising beside Sarah, her hands clenched into fists, her eyes blazing with defiance, a strength that made Sarah's heart swell, a glimpse of the daughter she'd lost and found. You lied. To me! She shouted, her voice echoing in the clearing, raw and unbroken, a defiance that seemed to shake the trees. You said my mother didn't want me, but you stole me. You locked me away, told me I was nothing. Why? What did you want? John's eyes darkened, his smile fading, his grip tightening on his knife, his body tensing like a coiled spring. You were the key, he said, his voice a hiss, a secret spilling out like poison. His eyes locked on Lily with a hunger that made Sarah's blood run cold. To everything, your blood, your name, your place in the order. But you ran, and now you're a liability. Sarah's mind reeled, his words a labyrinth of madness. Blood, order, key. Was he delusional, a madman with a twisted fantasy? Or was there something real, a network, a conspiracy tied to Emily's disappearance, to the photos Lily had mentioned, to the other missing kids Carver had hinted at? She pushed the questions down, her focus narrowing to the man before her, the threat to her daughter, the monster who'd stolen her world. John lunged, his knife flashing in the moonlight, a silver arc aimed at Sarah's chest, and she moved, on instinct, shoving Lily behind her, her own knife slashing upward in a desperate arc, her heart pounding, her body screaming with pain. The blades clashed, metal scraping with a sickening screech, sparks flying in the dark, pain searing through. Her wounded arm as John's strength drove her back, his weight a relentless force. She gritted her teeth, her side burning where his blade had grazed her, her thigh a sharp sting, her vision blurring with pain and rage. She kicked, her foot connecting with his knee, a dull crunch that made him stagger, his knife grazing her shoulder, a fresh wound that burned like fire, blood dripping onto the mud. Lily screamed, grabbing a rock from the ground, hurling it at John's head with all her strength, her aim true despite her trembling hands. It struck his temple, blood blooming, a dark streak against his pale skin, a wound that made him stumble, his knife falling into the mud with a soft thud, its blade sinking into the earth. Sarah seized the moment, tackling him, her body slamming into his, her knife at his throat, her weight pinning him to the ground, her blood dripping onto his face, her breath heaving, her eyes blazing with a fury that felt like it could burn the world. "Who are you?" she roared, her voice raw, her knife pressing against his skin, drawing a thin line of blood, her heart a wild thing that refused to break. "Why did you take her?" John laughed, a broken, chilling sound, his eyes wild, unhinged, a fanatic's, gaze that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, his breath hot against her face, his body tense beneath her. "You'll never know," he said, his voice a hiss, a taunt, a secret he'd take to his grave. "But you'll lose her again. The Order will find her, with or without me." A gunshot cracked, deafening in the clearing, and John's body jerked, blood spreading across his chest, a dark bloom in the moonlight, his eyes widening in shock, his laugh cut short. Sarah rolled off, her breath heaving, her eyes darting to the trees where Carver stood, his gun smoking, his shoulder bleeding, his face pale but resolute, his body swaying but his aim true. He lowered the gun, his free hand clutching his wound, his eyes locked on John's still form, a weight lifting from his shoulders, a guilt 18 years old finally eased. "It's over," he said, his voice rough, exhausted, a vow kept after years of failure. Sarah scrambled to Lily, pulling her into her arms, their bodies shaking, the rain washing away blood and tears, their breaths mingling in the cold air, their hearts beating in unison. "You're safe," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking, her heart a wild, aching thing, her arms tight around the girl she knew was her daughter. DNA test or not, a truth written in her bones. "You're safe." Carver limped toward them, his gun still in hand, his eyes scanning the dark, searching for threats that might still linger, his flashlight beam falling on John's body, the blood pooling beneath him, the knife glinting in, the mud, a silent witness to his end. "He's gone," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion, his body trembling with pain and relief. "But we need to move. There could be others." Sarah's mind reeled, John's words echoing. The order, your blood, the key. What had he meant? Was there more to this? A network of predators? A cult? A conspiracy tied to Emily's disappearance, to the photos Lily had seen, to the other, children who might still be out there, lost in shadows? She looked at Lily, saw the fear in her eyes, the strength beneath it, and pushed the questions down, her focus on her daughter, on the life they'd fought for, on the future they could still claim. They stumbled back to the cabin, Carver leading, his flashlight cutting through the rain, his steps uneven but determined, his shoulder a dark stain of blood, his face pale but resolute. Inside, they bandaged their wounds with a dusty first aid kit, the air heavy with silence and survival, the rain a soft roar against the roof. Sarah cleaned her arm, the cut deep but not life-threatening, her side and thigh stinging but manageable, her shoulder a fresh ache where John's knife had grazed her. Lily helped, her hands steady despite her own trembling, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. A bond forged in blood and fear, a love that had endured 18 years of separation. Carver's shoulder was worse, the slash deep, blood seeping through the bandages, but he waved off their concern, his face pale but resolute as he spoke into his phone, calling for backup, his voice low and urgent, his words a lifeline to the world beyond the forest. The police arrived an hour later, their lights flashing through the rain, their sirens a distant wail that seemed to belong to another world, their questions a blur of procedure and disbelief. John's body was taken away, his knife bagged as evidence, his secrets buried with him, or so Sarah hoped, though doubt gnawed at her, a shadow she couldn't shake. Carver recounted the night, his voice steady despite his pain, his eyes meeting Sarah's for a fleeting moment, a silent apology for the years he'd failed her, for the leads that had gone cold, for the promises he'd broken. She nodded, a small gesture of forgiveness, her focus on Lily, who sat beside her, their hands clasped, the pink jacket folded in her lap, its bunny patch a faded but fierce reminder of what they'd survived. In the days that followed, the truth unraveled in fragments, each one a shard of a larger, darker picture that refused to come into focus. The DNA test confirmed it. Lily was Emily, stolen at 3, returned at 21, a miracle born of pain, perseverance, and a love that had never faded. Carver's investigation, fueled by years of guilt, revealed John's aliases, James, Jack, David Hargrove, others, tied to missing children across state lines. Though no clear motive emerged, no bodies found, no proof beyond whispers in old case files. The photos Lily had mentioned, found in John's locked box, showed houses, churches, and faces, men, women, children, none of whom could be identified, their purpose a mystery that haunted Sarah's dreams. The order John had spoken of was a shadow, a whisper in police files, a cult or network that vanished when prodded, leaving no trace. a ghost that lingered at the edge of Sarah's mind. The police searched John's last known residence, a rundown trailer in a neighboring state, and found more questions than answers. The trailer was a shrine to paranoia. Cameras, locks, a police scanner, stacks of cash, and a journal filled with cryptic notes, references to the key, the chosen, and the cleansing. The FBI took over, their agents cold and clinical, their questions probing wounds that hadn't healed, but they found no leads, no network, no order, only a dead man and a trail that went cold. Sarah hated their detachment, their forms and files, but she cooperated, her focus on Emily, on protecting her from a world that had already taken too much. Sarah and Emily moved to a small house in a new town, a fresh start funded by a settlement from the supermarket chain, a hollow apology for a security failure 18 years ago that had changed their lives forever. The house was modest, its walls bare but waiting for new memories, its windows letting in light that felt like hope. They hung the pink jacket framed on the living room wall, its bunny patch a testament to what they'd survived, a reminder of a love that had endured, a beacon against the shadows that lingered. Emily enrolled in community college, her memories still fractured but her spirit unbroken. Her bond with Sarah, a lifeline through the nightmares that came in the dark. Her laughter, a sound Sarah had dreamed of for years. Sarah took a job at a local bakery, her hands kneading dough instead of wiping counters, the scent of bread and sugar a balm against the past. Her heart lighter, but never free of the questions John had left behind. What was the order? Why was Emily chosen? Were there others out there, hunting her still, waiting in the shadows? She wrote her fears in a notebook, hidden in her nightstand, a record for the day she might seek answers, a vow to protect Emily from whatever might come. But for now, she chose her daughter, chose the present, chose the life they were building, fragile but fierce, a defiance against the darkness that had tried to claim them. Carver visited once, a month after the cabin, his shoulder still bandaged, his eyes heavy with the weight of what he'd uncovered, and what he hadn't. He sat at their kitchen table, a cup of coffee untouched before him, his face lined with exhaustion and guilt, his voice low as he shared what he knew. John's real name was David Hargrove, he said, his eyes on Sarah, then Emily, a silent apology in his gaze. Ex-military, dishonorable discharge in '94, dropped off the grid soon after. He was linked to at least 3 other missing kids, 2 girls, 1 boy, all taken between '98 and '07, all untraced. No bodies, no proof, just patterns. The photos you mentioned, Emily, they're with the FBI now, but they're a dead end so far. No matches in any database, no names, no locations. Sarah's stomach twisted, her hand tightening around Emily's, her heart a heavy thing in her chest. "And the order?" she asked, her voice low, the word bitter on her tongue, a shadow that refused to fade. Carver shook his head, his jaw tight, his frustration palpable. "Nothing concrete," he admitted, his voice heavy with defeat. "Some chatter in old case files, a cult maybe, or a trafficking ring. Symbols in Hargrove's journal that match ones found in other cases, but it's like smoke. Grasp it, and it's gone. The FBI's looking, but they don't expect much. Hargrove's dead, though. That's something." Emily's voice was soft but steady, her eyes on Carver, her hand trembling in Sarah's, her fear a quiet, persistent thing that hadn't faded. "Will they come for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes searching Carver's for truth, for safety, for a promise the world couldn't keep. Carver hesitated, his eyes meeting hers, honest but heavy. A man who'd seen too much to lie. "I don't know," he said, his voice raw, his guilt a weight he'd carry forever. "But I'll keep digging. You have my word. If there's anything out there, I'll find it." Sarah nodded, her trust in him hard-won but real, a bond forged in blood and survival, a gratitude that carried the weight of years. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, a sincerity that made Carver's eyes glisten, a fleeting moment of absolution for a man who'd failed her once. Carver left, his car disappearing down the quiet street, the sun setting behind him, casting long shadows that seemed to linger, a reminder of the darkness that hadn't fully faded. Sarah locked the door behind him, her hand lingering on the bolt, her eyes scanning the windows, a habit she'd never break, a vigilance born of loss and reclaimed love. Emily stood beside her, their shoulders touching, a silent promise to face whatever came next together, a strength that felt like home. The nightmares came, for both of them. John's face, his knife, his chilling hum, the words, the order, the key echoing in the dark. But they faced them together too. Sarah woke to Emily's cries, held her through the shaking, whispered stories of their lost years to chase the shadows away. Tales of the park, the yellow slide, the lullabies she'd sung to a toddler who'd loved her fiercely. Emily, in turn, learned Sarah's tells, the way her hands twisted when she was anxious, the way her eyes lingered on the door, the way she'd pause mid-sentence, listening for sounds that weren't there, and brought her tea, sat with her, their silence a comfort deeper than words, a bond that grew stronger with each shared moment. Emily's memories returned in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror, each one sharp but incomplete, a puzzle they pieced together slowly, carefully, over cups of coffee and quiet evenings. She remembered the yellow slide, the park, Sarah's laugh, the way her mother's hands had felt, warm and safe, but also darker things, John's locked rooms, his whispered phone calls in the night, the way he'd watch her, as if she were a treasure or a weapon, his eyes gleaming with a purpose she couldn't name. She shared them with Sarah, her voice halting, her eyes distant, her hands trembling, but her resolve unbroken, a determination to reclaim her past, to understand the years stolen from her. Sarah listened, her heart breaking, but her love fierce, her hands steady as she held Emily's, a vow to help her heal, to carry the pain together. They planted a garden behind the house, a small act of defiance against the past, their hands in the dirt, coaxing life from the earth, a tangible hope in a world that had tried to break them. Emily chose sunflowers, their bright faces a reminder of the park, of a childhood she was reclaiming, their tall stalks a symbol of her strength, her resilience. Sarah chose roses, their thorns a silent vow to protect what she'd regained, their petals a promise of beauty amidst pain, their scent a balm against the memories that lingered. They worked side by side, their laughter mingling with the birdsong, their sweat and dirt a shared labour, their bond a living thing, growing stronger with each day, each root they planted, each bloom they nurtured. The questions lingered, John's, motives, the order, the photos, the other children who might still be out there, lost in shadows Sarah couldn't reach, their faces haunting her dreams, their stories a weight she couldn't shake. She wrote them down in her notebook, hidden in her nightstand, a record for the day she might seek answers, a vow to honour the others who hadn't come home, a promise to keep Emily safe from whatever might still lurk. But for now, she chose Emily, chose the present, chose the life they were building, fragile but fierce, a defiance against the darkness that had tried to claim them. One evening, 6 months after the cabin, as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of gold, pink, and lavender, Sarah and Emily sat on their porch, a blanket shared between them, their hands clasped, their breaths soft in the quiet air. The world was still, the street empty, the garden behind them a riot of colour, sunflowers nodding in the breeze, roses blooming against the fence, a testament to their survival, their hope. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of summer, the stars just beginning to emerge, a map of light against the deepening sky. "I love you," Emily said, her voice soft, her eyes on the horizon, a truth she'd carried through years of darkness, a vow she'd made to herself when she'd found the letter, when she'd run, when she'd fought to come home. Sarah's tears fell, silent and steady, her heart full. A love so fierce it felt like it could hold the world together. A gratitude for the miracle sitting beside her. "I love you too," she said, her voice a vow, a promise, a homecoming, her hands squeezing Emily's, their fingers intertwined, a bond that no shadow could break. Always. The sun dipped below the trees, and the stars emerged, a constellation of hope against the night, their light a guide through the darkness that had tried to claim them. Sarah and Emily faced it together, their scars a map of survival, their love a beacon that burned brighter than fear, a truth that had endured 18 years and would endure whatever came next. But the shadows weren't gone, not entirely. Late, that night, as Sarah locked the doors, her habit unbroken, she noticed a small envelope slipped under the mat, its edges crisp, its surface unmarked except for a single symbol, a crescent moon, like John's scar, drawn in black ink. Her heart stopped, her breath catching, her hand trembling as she picked it up, her eyes darting to the windows, the street, the dark beyond. Inside was a single sheet of paper, its message short, typed, unsigned. "The key is safe. For now." Sarah's blood ran cold, her mind racing, John's words echoing. The order will find her. She hid the note in her notebook, her hands shaking, her resolve hardening, a vow to protect Emily at all costs, to face whatever shadows still lingered. She didn't tell Emily, not yet. Her daughter's peace too fragile, her laughter too precious to risk. But Sarah knew the fight wasn't over, that the order, whatever it was out there, watching, waiting, a ghost that refused to die. She locked the door, her eyes on Emily's sleeping form, the starlight through the window casting a soft glow on her face, a reminder of the child she'd lost and found, the daughter she'd never let go. Sarah stood watch, her knife within reach, her heart a fierce thing, a mother's love, a shield against the dark, a promise to face whatever came next, to keep the light burning, no matter the cost. The stars shone, and the night held its breath, a world of shadows and hope, of endings and beginnings, of a mother and daughter who'd fought for each other and won, for now.